Hi all, welcome to all of you, and thank to be with us for this new talk of Copernicani. The topic of this evening will be digital technology and public policy. And we are here with Emily Tavoulareas and Laura Morelli. The question that we want to tackle this evening is if it is possible to bring digital technologies to the citizen and at the same time safeguard their rights and be also effective and deliver good services. Government usually buy technologies after defining strategies, so they buy from private companies. But today, digital technologies are the backbone of government because if we think to digital technologies as platform, the strategy aspect and the technology aspect are collapsing. So we want to listen this evening to the experience of people and protagonists of the digital revolution like Emily Tavoulareas and Laura Morelli. Emily has been senior advisor of the Chief Technology Officer of the White House in Washington and also founder of the Civitech movement. And she's not only a protagonist of the digital revolution and an expert in designing services for public goods and public policy, but he is also an expert who put really in practice what she's also teaching. And this dialogue will also helped also by Laura Morelli. Laura is a journalist, is an expert in finance and economics. She is also an innovator. She has been a founder by herself of Deal Flower, a super successful service in finance. She has been previously director of InsLife, and she's also able to have a view from the European perspective because she has been in past correspondent from Brussels for the news Italian agents for the agency of news, the Italian agency of news. So I think that now it's time to let the stage to Emily and Laura to start this talk. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. So I'll start. So thanks, first of all, Copernicani, to invite me to host this interesting talk. I'm a professional journalist, as Nadia just said. I've more than 10 years now in finance and economics. But I also covered other topics like life sciences, gender issues, and on a closer inspection, what they all have in common is technology. So there is no sector that has not been affected in some way, if not profoundly changed by technology. So obviously, it also applies to our society as a state organization. So that means rights in all their kinds. That means also duties and basically every aspect of our entire life. So I'm really honored to have this talk with Emily Tavoulareas because she practiced it. She touched this with her hands and created something. So, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this talk because we had a call and I was really fascinated about what she was saying. So Emily, let's start from we listened to your bio. Let's start from your experience in creating the US Digital Service, which is this public. I mean, you will explain better than me. What was the purpose and what was the first step you made? I mean, that's like the first thing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be with you all and to have the opportunity to speak with such an incredible group of people. And Laura, thank you in particular for being in conversation. So my experience actually did not start in technology. My career began in international development. I studied government. I studied international relations. And the beginning of my career was in international development, but that was happening right at the time that social media in particular was reaching its tipping point as as a tool for connection, for the dissemination of information. It was disrupting, particularly, it was disrupting flows of information and how people connected to each other and distributed information of various kinds. That was my entry point into technology, where I started to really see and also adopt those, at the time, emerging technologies into the work that I was doing with marginalized populations, like women in the Gulf who were seeking medical care, for example. From there, that's where I got into technology. I became very interested in how are decisions made about the products that we use. It became very clear to me as I was working in the Middle East in particular, that the technologies that we were using were not really designed for the people or for the context that they were in. And that's how I really became interested in the product side of it. You know, how do product decisions get made? In any case, to fast forward to your question about the US Digital Service, I state that background because it's an important sort of full
Yeah,
to
please
where
go
I
ahead.
am
I
now.
was wondering what you answered yourself, or when you ask yourself. I
Yeah,
mean, technology is
exactly.
not designed for the people, for who or what is designed
Who
for.
is exactly. And that's where my career started, right? So I'm sort of full circle. But with the US Digital Service, so I had an opportunity in 2013 to bring my experience with technology into the US government to help the US government sort of reimagine how it was delivering benefits and services to veterans of war at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And at that time, I just sort of happened to be in the right place at the right time. A very important website kind of exploded in flames. This was the healthcare.gov website. For those abroad, I do not expect for you to know what this is. But the short version of the story is the Obama administration had passed a landmark legislation for the United States related to healthcare. And the way you accessed that benefit was through a website, and that website crashed and was not working. So it became this turning point for my community of people who had experience designing and building technology, to use that expertise to solve a very specific problem that was affecting a policy goal. And that was my entry point. That crisis with healthcare.gov sort of created a very visible case for bringing more people like myself into government and bringing people with technology, with experience designing and building technology into the government to use those areas of expertise to improve policy outcomes. So that's where that idea came from. The US Digital Service itself was basically a little unit within the White House that was attracting designers, engineers, product people, data scientists to work with policymakers all over government to improve outcomes for the public. And there's a lot more to say about that, but I don't want to bore you. That's the basic gist of the US Digital Service.
So, what were the lessons learned? I mean, from that experience, that was the purpose. So, how did you put it in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the really significant things we learned that was that much of the time the technology was not the problem, nor was the technology the solution. A lot of the time, the problems were institutional. They were related to policy, either outdated or misunderstood policies. They were related to sort of the wrong experiences and the wrong skill sets being in government. So a lot of what we came away with was this really visceral understanding that technology is sort of neither the problem nor the solution here. If we really want to improve outcomes from the public, we need to start by thinking, what is the problem we are trying to solve here? And then from that, what role does technology play in that problem or in solving that problem, potentially? But we, as a group, really didn't come in with a predetermined solution. We came in focused on specific problems that we wanted to solve. And this is really at the heart of, I think, the lessons that came out of it, was starting with a specific focus on a problem is the right way to identify a solution that may or may not be technical in nature.
So you mean it's like you try with a single sector, let's say healthcare, so to see if it works and what is working and what not, and then trying to apply in a broad general sense.
Yes, exactly. And there are a few other smaller things I can mention here in terms of tactics that we think that really worked. Working in cross-functional teams is really effective. So creating an environment and a culture within public institutions that allows for cross-functional teams of people to solve a problem was really effective. Then the prioritization, I'd say, and understanding of the role relationships play in government was also really important. You cannot fix anything related to a large and complex system like a public institution without trust and without relationships that will outlive you. This is something that I think people with sort of innovative mindsets and who are sort of fixers at heart, come into scenarios believing they have an answer or part of it, but they will not be part of the long-term solution. They're there temporarily. And remembering that, I think, is really key to being able to succeed, because what you do needs to be able to outlive you. It needs to be able to work when you leave.
Yeah,
so you're hearing a lot of my answers have nothing to do with technology, which is very much intentional. What made the US Digital Service successful had not much to do with technology. It had to do with the people and the approach.
It's because it's the same thing as every technology appears. It's always the same. It's an instrument. It's a tool.
Correct.
So the way you use it and why you use it define the purpose of the tool. Can
Exactly.
be the same with cars, with weapons somehow, but yeah, that is
Exactly. A digital technology or a technology of any sort is a vehicle to accomplish something. And if you don't know what that something is, it's very hard to design and manage a tool effectively to accomplish that, right? And I think public institutions in particular, are incentivized to start with the solution. What are you going to do? What is the solution that you're going to provide? When that's actually not the right starting point. The right starting point is, what problem are you going to solve? And what outcome do you want to achieve?
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's your point pointed out the question of trust, relationship. So it means long-term view, because of course, actions from governments should be with a long-term view, because they have to survive from people that should be like, basically should be like this. That's another, the other point is that on the other side, technology is actually going faster, and technology plus other mechanisms, other variables like market economy or capitalism, let's say, the view, it's always shorter, it's becoming shorter and shorter. So technology is evolving in a really, really fast way. So that's one of the balances we have to find in this, putting democracy and technology is a question of balance, what I understood after our conversation. So one balance is long-term view and speed of technology evolution, because this is one of the points.
I think
and
the
we're
other
already going outside the path we planned in our call. That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I love conversations like this.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that I think is important to say out loud that we don't say out loud enough is that sometimes the goal people in positions of authority articulate publicly and their actual goal are different things. And you cannot effectively solve a problem that way, right? Like, you need to know what problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
So the heart of being able to effectively do any of what we're talking about here is to actually care about solving that problem, that it's not a talking point. Because what you're prioritizing is then what becomes what you optimize for in a product, right? So in technical, in technical jargon, like, what is the product optimizing for? And then what you're optimizing for sets into motion a cascade of decisions and actions that shape the rest of your work and your outcome. And in government in particular, because of the political sort of weight of a lot of the work, that's a real challenge, is being very clear about what is the priority here, because a lot of times you won't see the results short term. If you're trying to solve a problem, it's not going to be in this election cycle. It will be later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
That's
true.
hard. Yeah.
That's true. Okay, we will go maybe later. We'll come back to
Yeah.
this. I want to make this question. The first one we planned because it's actually interesting. Much of the public discourse emphasizes the promise of digital technology revolution. So e-government, open data, digital participation. Although I must say, then I mean the other people from Copernicani here maybe disagree, but in Italy we don't have the culture of this openness to technology evolution. So sometimes the perception is to be afraid of what is coming. But anyway, of course, having European health space data is super important. Having the other systems are important. But sometimes what the government promises are not what they can actually do. So what are the biggest gaps you saw also from your experience seeing the government mechanism from inside between promise and practice?
I love this question. I mean, I think the root of the problem is this idea that technology can solve human problems, which I just don't buy. I don't think it can. I haven't seen it do that. What I've seen it do is amplify whatever it is built on. So could technology effectively solve complex human problems in complex institutions? Sure. But what ends up happening is that technology is just a tool that lives in a context, and right, in a context of politics and human behavior and various technical systems and other incentives. So I think that it's important to bear in mind that the technology will just amplify whatever it is built upon, whatever values, systems, assumptions that it's built upon. But more specifically, I think one of the really big problems, or the big gap between promise and practice, is what are really unreasonable expectations of technology itself. And I think those unreasonable expectations come from sort of two places. One is false marketing, just false promises of what technology can do. And then on the government side, in particular, is sort of magical thinking, like this silver bullet thinking that if I could only buy this thing, it would solve all of my problems. Like, wouldn't it be nice if life was that simple? But it's not. So I think that is a very, very big part of it. Related to that is what I think of as the techno-solutionist mindset, that the root of the problem is this, is that technology can solve human problems when it just can't. And then the third is the lack of capacity of the institutions to grapple with these questions. So, you know, government institutions, I think, all over the world are famously not equipped even to converse or consider what the options are in terms of dealing with technical issues. And that's because for a very long time, you know, technology and implementation more broadly have been dismissed as an afterthought in thinking about expertise, especially in policy. So, you know, the policy was for the people in the suits with the ties making the fancy decisions, right? And you know, you over there in the black t-shirt and the hoodie, you know, you can go deal with the IT system. These things now are completely entangled, right? They're completely entangled. So it's hard to separate the technology now from the delivery of public policy. And we have not hired the right kind of talent and organized it in a manner that they can work effectively within public institutions. And that capacity really needs to grow at all levels of government. I mean, we could have another 5-hour conversation about capacity and what that means alone. But suffice it to say, you know, that is the lack of capacity for implementation and management of digital technology plays a huge role in the gap between promise and practice as well.
And that comes to a question we already thought. I mean, you already said that one of the challenges often institutional. So governments, agencies, lack of the technical capacity. So how do you think this can change? What could be the key levers to shift this culture? I mean, this can apply to the US government. In Europe, every government works in a different way. European Parliament works in its own way. So, but it's interesting. Maybe we can find something in common. I don't know.
Well,
I
honestly,
hope so.
the US Digital Service was modeled after the government digital service in the UK many years ago. So that there is sort of continuity there. I mean, I think what the US Digital Service and the government digital service in the UK and other similar teams globally had been doing is basically the right approach. And that is basically not aiming to do everything on those teams. You are creating essentially a brain trust of people who deeply understand how excellent products and services are delivered at scale out in the private sector, and applying some of those techniques and approaches to solving public problems. But the approach is one that does not assume the government can operate like a private company, because it cannot, as I believe the US government has demonstrated. It cannot, and it should not. It has a different set of incentives. It has to serve everybody. Everything needs to work all the time for everyone in every corner of the country. There are all sorts of reasons that it's different. But the technical talent, the designers, the engineers, the product people that come into these teams come in with a set of tools and skills that they marry with policy expertise. So what you see there is a combining of expertise in order to solve a problem, and the people on those technology teams not assuming that they have a solution to the policy problem, but knowing that they are bringing tools to the table to support the solving of that problem or the intervention that is needed. Does that make sense? So you bring the right mix of people, but you're organizing them in a manner where they are not the ones with the answers. They're the ones with the toolkit that work with the people who together can identify the answers.
Yeah, of course. Makes really sense. I was actually about to ask you in the beginning who you were working with in creating the US digital services, because I was interested in knowing the different skills and knowledges are around the table, you know. But I mean,
You mean
in general.
the people we hired or who helped create it on the policy side?
Yeah, also who you hired.
Yeah. So a lot of the people from the early days of the US digital service were fairly well known in the technology, in the US tech scene, as at least people from companies who are well known from Meta, Google, Amazon, Dropbox. I'm trying to think of others. They're escaping my brain. But people who had a number of health companies
Yeah.
who had experience designing and delivering products at scale. And that's a big part of it. But in those early days, we were recruiting for people who could come in and run at a high level without a lot of management structure, because it was a very small team and no one really understood how exactly it would evolve over time. But I think in the beginning, people imagined maybe it would be 20 people, but it grew to 200 over the course of 2 years. And then the range broadened a lot. So we had people who did visual design, service design, product management, front-end engineers, back-end engineers, site reliability engineers, data scientists, you name it. But critically, one of the first hires, at least in the US, was an expert in procurement. So she was someone who had worked in the US government on contracting for, I think, somewhere around 12 years. And some of our colleagues who founded the US Digital Service met her and said, "You have a brain that thinks differently about solving problems. Can you come here, please, and help us figure out how can we change the way the US government buys and builds software? How can we think about contracting? Because in the US, it's a huge part of the equation. US government employees famously are mostly managing third-party contractors in the development and delivery of technology. They're not doing it themselves. So contracting was huge, but I say that because it's not just the technology people. It's the technology people with people who understand budgets and contracts, right? And hiring, because that's how our hiring pipelines were built.
Yeah.
So there's this mythology around, oh, if you just bring in some engineers and add them to the soup, it'll be fine. And as it turns out, that's not exactly how you make lasting change.
Yeah. Well, every system has its own peculiars. So, about the use of technology from governments, they increasingly use it to streamline service delivery, also licensing, welfare permits. Actually, if you think that for a certain time, when we were talking about Bitcoin and blockchain, in Italy, we had this talk. I mean, people were discussing about having a blockchain instead of the guy who signs. I don't know the name in English of notaio, but I mean that could be a really real revolution for that. So, I mean, what do you think would be the design practices or institutional practices to ensure that those systems are actually robust and trustworthy and transparent?
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry,
the
in the
short
case of the
answer,
blockchain, it could be by itself. because it is designed by this, but it didn't work apparently.
I won't I won't address
Hmm.
blockchain because I don't have anything nice to say. But the short answer to my mind is that we need to prioritize people and the outcomes we are looking for as governments over everything else. Over everything else. Technology is, like we were saying before, just a vehicle to accomplish something. But in government, that something is delivering better policy outcomes, better services. And everything starts with the ultimate goal of what we prioritize, which is why I think we need to, when we're thinking about ensuring systems do what we want them to and operate the way we want them to, is to be very clear about what we want, clear and honest. In the United States, recently, the team that I had founded, the US Digital Service, was renamed DOGE and became the US DOGE Service, run by Elon Musk for a while. The focus there went from effective government to efficient government, which does not sound like a big change, but is actually huge. Effective government means things work as intended. Efficient government just means it works quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And those do not achieve, the same outcome. So we must always be clear-eyed about that goal, who benefits, and why. So back to your question about how do we ensure that systems are equitable and transparent, robust, trustworthy? First, you need to actually care about those things. Like, they're not just talking points. Like we were saying before, what you prioritize sets into motion all of these actions and decisions. And I think that's true even in the private sector. You've seen Meta, a company that for 2 decades now, or however long, has been telling us that its products are about friendship and connection, when actually it's about engagement, which leads the company to create things that don't deepen your connection to friends. They replace your friends, right? So I focus on that a lot because I think the value of clarity around goals is really the missing ingredient here. And then I think the other one is to be very judicious about the problem, to make sure that you understand the problem you say you want to solve, because you cannot solve a problem you don't fully understand. And so much of the policy world is obsessed with quantitative data. Everything in policy runs on data sets. And the truth is, there's really only so much you can understand from numbers and from data. You can understand the what, but you cannot understand the why. You cannot understand what's between the numbers, what's driving the numbers. And we need to make more space for that. So that's all a long answer to your question, but I think it's really that being clear about the goals, spending time understanding that problem, and then creating space to really understand the problem, not through data, through observation, through connection, discussion. Because otherwise you're only seeing a tiny fraction of the problem.
Yeah, but that means that there's political will to do so, political capacity, political, I don't know, attitude toward this. So what I was thinking was more creating a sort of cage in which you cannot, that they really can survive people, because the direction I see is not the one of people open to discussion and diversity and this, but technology is still there, will be there forever, and more and more and more important, and changing life. So they have to do something. It can't be only on their ethics or.
Yeah, yes, I think that's exactly right. And I think it's also why design and as a method. So when you think about, many of you on the call I know are from, from industry. Design plays such a huge role in the creation of the products that have come to dominate our world. The methods that are used to design effective products are inherently focused on non-quantitative information, right? Because good design requires the suspension of assumptions. It requires you to listen to people and prioritize the needs of other people. Because when you design something, you're not just making something pretty, you're solving a problem for someone who is not you, right? And I can't think of a better analogy for policy, right? Like, isn't that what policy is? So, data can be helpful, quant can be helpful, but we have left no space for that. And I think that's one of the most exciting things that bringing people who know how to design and deliver great products bring to the table, because that design approach is a powerful way to push back on the incentives of these large institutions and say, hey, I know you have all these crazy institutional incentives, but this is the problem we're focused on. And these are the people we're focused on. And in my view, at least, it's been a very useful approach for changing how organizations operate internally and shift the attention away from the political and the institutional incentives and reorient them toward the people they're serving.
Yeah, that would be the right way to make everything more equitable, robust, and trustworthy. Definitely. We last 10 minutes. We could have continued for long, but who do you think should govern digital infrastructure? And how do you balance centralization versus decentralization?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question. I mean, I think everyone wants a clear answer to this, and unfortunately there is none, because infrastructure is almost entirely, technical infrastructure is almost entirely governed by non-state actors. And the uncomfortable truth is that the nation state can only reach so far into that technical stack. So when we talk about governance, we're talking about a very multifaceted, multidimensional, global group of stakeholders. So it sort of depends what part of the infrastructure we're talking about. But, I think that governments collectively have a lot more of a chance, have a much greater chance to affect outcomes as a collective than as individual states at this point. Unless you are the United States or China, you need to be working with others. I wish I had more to say on governance. I'm a little hesitant because that's not my area of expertise, but I think one thing that is worth saying is that there's an inherent tension here, that improving access and effectiveness of technology in government is one side of the coin. The other side of that coin is highly centralized data that can be used to surveil and control the public. So a huge question for democracies right now, everywhere, is how do you improve access and effectiveness of government without accidentally creating products and systems that enable anti-democratic behavior. Because ultimately efficiency and surveillance are two sides of the same coin. We've already seen this in the private sector, right? We can see it in a lot of the products that we use that do ultimately surveil us. So I think that before we even consider governance questions is for nation states to be really thinking about, what does that balance between these sort of these two sides of the coin, what does that look like? What is the public comfortable with? Because it is a trade-off. Just like, the more you shop with Amazon, the more information you're giving them, the more of your own agency for determining what you're buying you give up. And that translates to a bunch of different places. So once you get to the state, it's more complex.
What conclusion did you come up to about this balance? Maybe
balance?
it depends on that efficiency, risk of surveillance. Well, maybe it depends on the problem. I mean, how me, citizen, can sacrifice about my privacy and the freedom of movement in the name of what? To solve which problem? Maybe.
Name of what is exactly right. I mean, I think the public has started to wake up to this, at least in the United States, wake up to the fact that, data is control. And the more you give up, the more you are giving up your agency, and your own control of your own space. I mean, I don't know that I have a conclusion, but I have some concerns that are worth raising. I think because efficiency is so attractive, people, at least in the United States, are very willing to give up more information or to give up privacy in order to make some parts of their lives easier, not thinking about the long tail effect. But we can, if you look at China for a moment, China has this everything app, right? It has an app through which the public does literally everything from like order food online to pay taxes to order, call an Uber, listen to music. It's all centralized. That vision also exists in the United States, but it exists not from the perspective of surveillance, but it exists from the perspective of efficiency. But you land in the same place. It's the same product. You started with different goals, but you end up sort of with the same thing. And then the question is just, how is it used? So, I don't think that there are any neat answers to these questions, but I think spaces like this are especially important so people can start wrestling with the questions and the messiness of the answers, because we've never been here before. And how you answer the question depends on where you stand. But at the end of the day, I think people should be determining that trade-off, not companies and not governments. I think people need to be making very clear-eyed decisions and within their homes, within their schools, within their communities, of those trade-offs.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that is related to the fact that we have different, every one of us, every country, every culture, every person has a different perception of technology. It polarizes. So there are the tech enthusiasts and there are the skepticals that remain skepticals all their lives. So I mean that makes government works more in a more difficult way because there's no like a unitarian thoughts about this. So this makes things more complicated. But yes,
I think
thank you,
that's great.
Emily. Anyway, I'm not going further with the question because then we don't have other time for the Q&A. So Nadia, if you want to start, I mean, we were just 2 minutes before, but if I start another question, then we don't have time for Q&A.
You know what? With those 2 minutes, can I just add one more thing, or 1 minute
Yeah,
now?
definitely.
Yes.
I used to be an enthusiast. So yeah, believe it or not, I graduated from college in 2004, right? Like that was the year Facebook came out. And I entered the workforce in 2007, like the professional workforce. And I was definitely one of those, like, the internet's going to make everything amazing and everything's going to be awesome and it's going to democratize all the things. And like I had drank every drop of that Kool-Aid. And now I find myself like, wait, we've seen this movie before. We already know how this ends. We know where this is going. Have we learned nothing? So I find myself in this sort of cautiously optimistic, but like, can we like learn from the past though before we go barreling to AI, guys? So anyway, I'm a recovering enthusiast.
Yes. We have also some questions from the audience. I just look at them. I have one question from if I may ask a question, it would be interesting to get into the specific of your project. For example, was there ever a project that initially seemed so difficult, but then turned out to be surprisingly possible to be carried out? So, from your experiences, you think something where you started thinking, oh, okay, this is impossible, and then you ended up with success?
There probably is, but my whole brain is full of the opposite, which is we thought it would be easy, but it was really complicated.
It's a question and it is an answer.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Something we thought would be simple, but was actually complex. I mean, probably hiring, to be honest. Like that's not a technology one, but I think many people assumed that hiring people would be pretty straightforward, and it was not. It was quite complicated. And I think was one of the most lasting sort of legacies of the U.S. Digital Service was creating a pipeline for hiring particular types of people who otherwise would have been very difficult to hire in government.
In fact, I linked to another question that has arrived. That was, how did you manage recruiting the right talents, given the competition from Silicon Valley and all the other questions?
It's a very good question. I mean, the uncomfortable. So there are two answers to this question. One answer is that the U.S. government, if you are at an early stage of your career, government salaries are not drastically different than, what you might be getting paid. And for some people, it was actually a great move. In those early days that we were really recruiting people who were farther along in their careers. It was a service ask. It was an opportunity to serve your country. So in many ways, the recruiting pitch was one of service to country and service to the public. And it was always seen as temporary. So the entire hiring mechanism for the US Digital Service was come serve with us for as long as you can. But the hiring mechanism was for, I believe it was 2 years, with the ability to renew that 2 years only once. So you could not stay for more than 4 years. But it was an impermanent job. So for many people, it was a detour, and they went back into their positions. But the salary ranges are they're a huge challenge. I mean, in Silicon Valley, they're massively inflated. That's my view, but what do I know? But people took pay cuts to come work in the US government, and they did it because they believed in the mission. They believed in the president. They believed, and not all of them agreed with the president, but at that time was Barack Obama. But, people wanted to serve their country and the public, and they did it because they wanted to. It's not for everybody. Honestly, when we were hiring people, we were very clear about the fact that this is probably going to be the hardest, most frustrating job you've ever had. And you will not be coding, mostly. You'll be explaining why it's important to do things a different way most of the time. You will not be like creating things out of ones and zeros, which was hard for people.
It's always like a mission.
Like a mission. And
Yeah.
yes, I have another, there is another question. That is, so you talked about technology. We understand that technology is not neutral when it is a platform, since digital is the backbone of the digital government, is not neutral. So efficiency is not a neutral choice. It is a lesson that you gave us this evening. What do you expect for the future?
Well, today, October 7th in the United States, it depends how I'm thinking about the future. So I'm going to choose to answer this question with relation to technology and not anything else. I expect that the US government in particular will continue barreling down the road of AI adoption, and then we'll be spending a lot of time unwinding those decisions. I think many countries fall into this category of adopting an essentially experimental technology way too fast, and we will be dealing with the consequences of that for a long time. Nadia, was this your question?
Yes.
Could you say more about what you mean about future? Because I want to give you a real answer.
Yes, what will happen? I think that I just try to understand and to interpret what will happen also with AI and with the new wave of emerging technologies, because we are seeing that everybody is looking for the adoption, and but the pattern that we are seeing is that we buy technology, we pretend to buy technology, and switch on, switch off, having everything done. And so the future is like this. We have a lot of technology arriving, provided by private companies, by startups, by corporates, and the same technology that will serve corporates will pretend to be also the answer to the public. But the lesson of this evening was very important for us, because we are going to understanding from your speech that when we do something for the public goods, it is different, because we have also to have an impact on social aspect, on rights for diversity, and so on. So with the way of artificial intelligence, what do you think about this?
That's helpful. Okay, thank you to focus me in. I mean, my answer to that is that, what's probably obvious is that the world in 20 years will look very different than it does today. And I don't necessarily mean positive or negative or technologically advanced, because history is not always linear, and progress is not guaranteed. And I know that a lot of people are talking about and thinking about long-term existential threats posed by advances in technology. Those are not my concerns. My concerns are much more immediate. And that's that people and organizations and governments are integrating generative AI into their lives and workflows and products as if it's a reliable technology when it's not. And there are real consequences to that. You know, I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about what AI is, and we talk about it as this singular thing, when there are significant differences between like AI in industry and AI, like generative AI. But, at the end of the day, it's not reliable. It's not consistent. It's wrong a lot. And maybe even most critically, the people who design and create it cannot explain how it works or why it produces what it produces. So, the honest answer is I don't think anyone can predict what's going to happen next. But what I do know is that the decisions that we make now in our communities, in our schools, in our governments will determine that answer. And that because of the way technical infrastructure works, once those decisions are made, it will be very hard to unwind it if we don't like the outcomes. And technology companies want us all to feel that this is all inevitable, but it's not. It's not. We're being made to feel like it's inevitable. And I think that is really, it's important for us to remember when we think about the future is we can either accept other people deciding what the future is for us, like people wearing meta glasses with cameras on them everywhere they go, or we can start to articulate what we do or don't want in our future. And we need more of that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We could really continue also because while you were talking, I mean, just quick one. It's true that what decision we take now is going to have effect, at least medium-term effect. And this made me thought that in Italy, just exactly this year, they prohibited the use of a smartphone at school, at high school. So at the high school, you cannot use the phone, not even the teachers. While in Estonia, they are using AI in the schools. I mean, they use iPhones as a tool for teaching, and they are trying to use AI and you have the students using AI too, learning how to do. So, I mean, these are two clear decisions that actually can bring you to a different. Maybe we are right in Italy, I don't know, to prohibit the use of smartphone at school because actually they have an effect on kids. Maybe it's not like this, but it's actually a very, very interesting issue. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have this conversation again, Nadia and Nino, in 5 years. I don't want to be too long on the time, but.
Yeah. Yes, I think that we have a lot to think about after this talk also as Copernicani. I am honest, these are things that we discuss so much, but when you have a two visionary like you, it is making the difference. So we come back with a lot of insight and enthusiasm for our discussion. So we are so happy this evening, and thank you so very, very, very very much to all of you.
Thank you all,
Laura, and thank you, Emily.
Absolutely.
A warm thank you from all of us.
And Nadia, if you want, I can stay on if people want to chit chat.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
Grazie a tutti.
Ciao.